All right, let's build the ultimate study guide for some of the trickiest ideas in epidemiology. Our goal is pretty simple, to get you from feeling kind of swamped by all the formulas to feeling totally fluent and ready to go.
You know that feeling right before a big exam when terms like incidence, prevalence, and attack rate all start to blur together and sound the same? Yeah, if you've been there, you are definitely not alone. It's a classic hurdle for anyone studying this stuff.
But what if we could just untangle all of that in the next few minutes? Well, that's exactly what we're about to do. Let's make these core concepts so clear you'll feel confident about tackling anything.
Okay, so here is our roadmap. First, we'll tackle the two big pillars, incidence versus prevalence. Then, we're going to see how they connect using the famous bathtub model and its super simple formula. After that, we'll jump into the real world with an outbreak investigation, and we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary to make sure it all sticks.
So first things first, let's talk about the absolute bedrock of how we measure disease in a population. I promise, if you really nail the difference between incidence and prevalence, everything else we cover is just going to click right into place.
So think of incidence as being all about speed and risk. It's kind of like a video camera, it's always rolling, and it's only recording the new events as they happen. It really answers the question, how fast are people in this group developing this disease? The magic word to remember here is new.
Prevalence, though, is totally different. It's more like taking a single photograph. It doesn't care when you got sick. It just asks, do you have this condition right now? It's a snapshot in time that captures every single existing case, both old and new, to give us a sense of the total disease burden in a population. And putting them side by side like this really makes it clear. Just look at that analogy row. Incidence is the flow of water pouring into a tub. Prevalence is a snapshot of how high the water level is at one specific moment. Seriously, if you can just remember flow versus snapshot, you've pretty much got it down. So how exactly do this flow and this snapshot actually connect with each other? Well, this is where the classic bathtub model comes in. I'm telling you, for so many students, this is the visual that causes that aha moment. Just picture a bathtub, okay? The water that's pouring in from the faucet, that's your incidence. That's the stream of new cases. The total amount of water that's actually in the tub at any given moment, that's the prevalence. And the water leaving through the drain, well, that represents people who are either cured or, sadly, have passed away. And this is where the model gets really cool, because it shows you what changes that water level. If you crank up the faucet, meaning you increase the incidence, the water level is going to rise. Or what if you partially clog the drain, so people are living with the disease for longer? The water level, the prevalence, goes up. On the flip side, if you open that drain wider with better cures, prevalence goes down. Now, this really elegant bathtub model isn't just a helpful way to think about things. It actually describes a real mathematical relationship. So let's turn this picture into a simple but super powerful formula that you can actually use. And here it is. P is approximately I times D, or prevalence is roughly equal to the incidence rate multiplied by the average duration of the disease. The water level in the tub, P, depends on how fast the water's coming in, I, and how long each drop of water stays in that tub, D. It's simple, it's elegant, and it's incredibly useful. But of course, for any exam, you've got to know the fine print, right? This formula works best under a few conditions. First is what we call a steady state, which just means that the rate of new cases and the average disease duration aren't changing like crazy. Second, the formula is most accurate when the prevalence is pretty low, usually less than 10%. And finally, you want a stable population. So let's try it out. Let's plug in some numbers. Imagine a disease has an incidence of 100 new cases for every 100,000 people each year. Okay, so as a decimal, that's 0.001. Now, if the average person has the disease for about 5 years, we just multiply. 0.001 times 5 gives us a prevalence of 0.005, which is just 0.5%. And this is where using the formula gets really exciting. What happens if a new treatment comes along and it cuts the disease duration in half, down to just 2.5 years? Notice the incidence, the number of new cases, hasn't changed. But because people are getting better faster, the overall prevalence, the total burden on the healthcare system, gets sliced in half, down to 0.25%. That right there is the real-world power of a great treatment. Okay, let's switch gears. We're going to move from the slow burn of chronic diseases to the really fast-paced world of an outbreak investigation, where we use a very special type of incidence measure. Meet the attack rate. It's basically just a type of incidence that we use for a very specific, well-defined group over a short time. This is the go-to metric when you need to figure out how many people who were exposed to something, like, say, some sketchy food, actually ended up getting sick.
For example, let's say 40 people ate the suspicious chicken salad at a banquet and 30 of them got sick. All you do is divide 30 by 40. Bam! The attack rate for people who ate that chicken salad is a whopping 75%. This is literally how investigators start to pinpoint the source of an outbreak. But, the attack rate doesn't tell us how contagious a disease is from one person to another. To figure that out, we use something called the secondary attack rate. This measures how many people get sick after being exposed to one of the initial cases. Think their family members, their roommates, their close friends. So if those first few cases had a total of 10 household contacts and 3 of those people later got sick, the secondary attack rate is simply 3 divided by 10, or 30%. This is how we start to understand how easily a disease can jump from person to person. All right, to wrap things up, let's quickly lock in 3 more terms that get mixed up all the time but have really precise meanings. Getting these right on an exam shows you've really got this stuff down. Let's break this down. First, a rate. The absolute key to a rate is that it always has a unit of time in the denominator. It's all about speed, like our incidence rate. Next, a proportion. This is just a fraction where the top number is included in the bottom number, like our attack rate. It's got to be somewhere between 0 and 1. And finally, a ratio. This just compares 2 totally different quantities. The top number isn't part of the bottom one, like when we calculate an odds ratio comparing 2 different groups. And that brings us to one last little thought experiment that pulls everything together. Imagine a medical miracle happens. A new treatment lets people with a chronic disease live twice as long. Now that's fantastic news for patients, right? But the treatment doesn't stop new people from getting the disease in the first place. So, using what you've just learned, what happens to the overall prevalence, the total burden on our healthcare system? It's a tricky little paradox, and it's the perfect test of that P equals I times D formula.